This last Thursday, OWI hosted their first Q&A about Squad in well over a year, and in this video I hope to give a summary and highlight some of the important things that they said that will be coming up with the game, as well as at the end I will be sharing my thoughts of what I think about a bunch of the changes and how it will affect Squad in the long run. The first thing talked about in the Q&A was fast ropes, and will they be added anytime soon? This has been a feature that people have been asking for years. There was a mod for fast ropes probably 5-6+ years ago, so a lot of the community have been waiting for it for a long time. Unfortunately, they said they have no future plans. It's on their list, but don't plan on adding it anytime soon. The next thing on their list was talking about scout vehicles, such as the Coyote, the M7A3 that was just added, and will they be improving them anytime soon? The response from this was basically they don't want to make it that vehicles are any more OP than they already are. They acknowledge that right now in the game, vehicles are overpowered, at least compared to what they once were post-ICO, and how they don't want to make them overpowered, and so they don't plan on buffing these vehicles anytime soon. There was an idea, however, for the commander seat in vehicles such as the Coyote to potentially have stuff like thermals to help out and be more useful of a seat than just sitting there as a camera and as a spotter. To add on to the topic of vehicles, they also talked about adding vehicle damage systems, such as in Squad 44/Postscriptum. In that game, there's a very in-depth vehicle damage component system. They basically said don't expect anything similar to that anytime soon, based on the fact that they would have to redesign the hit models and the damage outputs for every single vehicle in the game, and they said that they do not have enough time and resources to do something like that, but they would like to look into that in the future. The next question was about adding on to the current server capacity of Squad, so potentially 128 players versus the 100 players we have now. The response to this was basically, we already have kind of performance issues with Squad sometimes at 100 players, so adding on to this is something that would just affect performance even more than it already does, and is something that is probably not going to be added anytime soon. Early on in this Q&A, they also touched on the Javelin. This has been another feature that had been teased years ago when the Marines first came out. There was screenshots when they first teased the faction with them having a Javelin. This is something they said that would be hard to balance, and they would not likely be adding anytime soon, but would want to eventually. The next topic was about the Insurgency game mode, and will that be reworked anytime soon? Anybody that knows Squad, that's played Squad for a long time, knows that the Insurgency game mode has been in the game for a substantial amount of time, longer than RAS, but it also has not changed in a very long time and is underplayed, and there's a lot of potential for the game mode, but it just is left in a state that is not playable to the way that most Squad players would want to play it. The devs touched on this section knowing that the game mode is not in a good place, but said that they want to rework it in the future and that it's on the list, but once again, probably not anytime soon. The next question talked about commander assets, commander call-ins, and basically asked, will there be more variety? Will there be different ones added on later in the future? Baron, the lead game designer, basically said that there are going to be more call-ins specific to the new battle groups that they just implemented with the factions and voting feature that they added recently, and that there is a lot of ideas for that to go forward, and that is something that is in the works. The next question, which is something I was very excited to hear that I've been waiting for a long time, was that there is an endgame scoreboard rework in the works, and that they admitted that the current system is not great, that it doesn't show you how much value you really were for the team other than just kills and revives, and how they want to improve it, shed light on the bigger picture, and this was one that they said should be soon, which by what we know in Squad terminology could mean 3 more weeks or 3 more years. The next whole section was prefixed by the community manager Siege, talking about how they wanted to move past the ICO, the infantry combat overhaul, and how they wanted to focus now on balancing individual items and weapons and platforms rather than touching on the entire gunplay as a whole. They want to focus individually on things like sway, recoil, all that stuff, rather than continuously changing the whole infantry system as a whole. This was then continued by perhaps the most kind of odd thing about the whole Q&A that they talked about, where it was mentioned that window height, everybody knows window height in Squad. When you try and go up to a window, a lot of times you can't look down, or you can't bipod, or you can't even shoot through it because it's just too high, that it's just over your vision, and it's a very frustrating thing. There was talk about variable crouch height in one of the questions about whether you could be able to make it so that you could crouch at different heights to more accurately shoot through these windows. The response from Baron was that he would rather do an environmental change and change every asset on every building, or at least he inferred this. He said that actually crouch height may be on the 2 milsimi side for Squad, and that is something that he would rather not look into, and would rather look into the environmental changes. The next question was, in addition to one of the problems that's been plaguing Squad ever since the ICO update, which they have just released basically another statement on, which was that they're working on the issue of weapon sway / recoil being worse the lower your FPS is. And they're trying to fix how that's tied to FPS and make it consistent across all platforms. This was a good to at least hear that they are still working on it, but still disappointing to hear that it doesn't seem like it's going to be fixed in the immediate future, and that they asked that the community be patient and wait for them to fix this glaring issue. The next question referenced to whether they would consider another engine upgrade. This has been a solution that some members of the community have posed to the performance issues of Squad recently. They said that they are probably not in the immediate future. Last time Squad had a major engine update, we didn't have an update for over 6 months before they got it out, so they probably don't want to do that again, seeing as they are getting an ever-increasing amount of players and don't want to kill the content for the game. They said they're always looking into ways about upgrading the engine, but that is not something that's going to happen in the immediate future. They then moved on to talking about potentially adding more admin features into the game. A lot of server admins in Squad have been asking for years for more features, and most of the good servers in Squad have to put plugins to their servers to have enough admin features to make their jobs a lot easier. They specifically talked about admin features such as lasers, where you can see where the player is looking that you are spectating from above, and just to help in terms of spectating and spotting perhaps cheaters or other things. They said that there's not enough resources at this time for them to add more onto this feature, but that is something they want to improve, but it's not going to happen anytime soon. It was at this point they finally moved on to the topic I was hoping to hear from the most about this Q&A, which was the performance, the optimization. Squad currently is not running well for a lot of people, even with good setups, and their response to this was questionable to say the least. The community manager was quoted as saying, basically, only older systems really struggle with the game. And basically, they kind of went on to downplay the issue a lot, basically saying that they do want the game to be optimized, and they want more people to be able to play the game and not stop playing the game because it's unoptimized. So they're always currently working on solutions to this issue of optimization, but they didn't have anything constructive in terms of how they were going to continue to optimize the game, and just kind of said that it was an issue, but that they're just going to keep working on it and it'll get better over time, I guess. The next topic was talking about whether server admins would be able to integrate voting for the endgame voting screen for weather conditions on certain maps. Baron kind of went on to say, basically, we want to add something like this, but the time at the end of the match is already long enough, so we don't really want to at the moment. Plus, right now, the weather systems create environments that aren't always the best with the lighting, and so they want to fix that before they add something like that to the game. But in the future, we might be able to see the option for server admins to add the option for different weather conditions onto certain maps. The next question was asking whether they would consider adding topographical maps to the base game of Squad. The response was generally that they wanted to add something like this, but they once again don't have enough resources, that if they were going to eventually put in the game, they also think it would be too intense or too much for newer players to understand the maps as effectively, so they'd want it as a side feature that experienced players could use and not the base maps of their games. They also added on to this that there's web-based maps like squadmaps.com or the mortar calculator that you can use anyway, so just use that, and that's good enough. For the next little bit, they touched on factions. They were asked about potential new factions. Baron basically said that they have a ton of ideas for factions and that there's a bunch in the works. They wanted to prioritize, though, the factions that they have the largest player base, and they gave that as the reason why they put a lot of time into the PLA and the Chinese factions, because they wanted to serve that audience, and that they're going to focus on audiences for their game that aren't yet served as a faction currently in the game. In the last section of the Q&A, they decided to focus on specific things that they are adding soon and that we can expect in the next few updates for Squad, the main thing of which was the PMC faction, which was previously announced through a teaser on their Discord. And then they also are saying that CAS helos, in addition to AA emplacements and weapons, are in the works as well and should be coming relatively soon. Addition to this, they talked about their in discussions with the mod team that currently have the French and Germany mods, and they're in the works of hopefully buying them out and adding them to the game eventually. They also talked about the Gary, the vehicle-borne IED truck from Project Reality, that is on the list and they want to add that in the near future. And the very last thing they said was that they are planning to standardize the invasion game mode layers to be more like the RAS layers that are currently in the game, so that they're in a certain pattern where they can all be standardized and in a spot that is good for balance and what they want for the game. And that was all they had to say for the Q&A. It overall was a pretty informative Q&A, I will say. And I appreciate that they had better questions here than what they had from their previous Steam written Q&A, which was 10 selected questions, which were hand-picked to say the least, if not just borderline scripted. So I'm glad that they had some more intense questions here, and I'm really glad that they started doing the Q&A again. It has been years almost since they have done the last Q&A, and these were really the number one things for most of early Squad that kept us informed about the development of the game, what was going on. And them not doing it for a long time, I think, has really hurt the communication with the community, and I'm really glad they're doing them again. That being said, as you probably very easily picked up during this video, they didn't seem awfully prepared on a lot of the topics that were on the questions, even though they had pre-picked these questions out. There was a lot of questions that were just, maybe eventually we'll add this, or yeah, we know that's just on the list, or we want to add that, but we don't have the resources. I mean, it wasn't until the very end when Howitzer started talking about what is planned and what is happening and what is coming in the recent updates that I was actually like, oh, okay, so this is what they're working on. They really didn't highlight a lot. We just know that the PMCs are coming soon, that the rework is coming soon for the scoreboard, and that there's some other random features like CAS helos coming back, which we'll see how that goes with the balancing that helos are currently in the game. That's something I really was kind of hoping was down the list quite a ways, but Who knows? Maybe they do a good job with that. But overall, I'm a little disappointed, especially with how they downplayed the performance. Squad is one of the worst performing games I currently play. I play a multitude of FPS games, and it is the only one where I consistently have performance issues on the same maps or just in general. Every other FPS game I play, yeah, there's occasional times where you get lag, but it's nowhere like Squad. It's not consistent like Squad. Squad is the main reason why I had to upgrade my setup, because the game is too intense. So them downplaying that issue and saying that it's only bad PCs that have that issue really was not doing it for me. And I do not appreciate how they just did not have really a plan for future optimization. Obviously, optimization isn't what gets the money rolling in, isn't what grabs the headlines. It's the new factions, it's the new maps, it's the new features, right? But obviously, they need to do something about the optimization. I have never seen so many people complain about optimization on the Squad subreddit in the history of this game. It is at a point where it is just not fun to play on a lot of maps because there's just constant stuttering on good setups. It's not just bad setups. And I think that a update that addresses the performance and that they really took time to try and optimize certain things would be well received by the hardcore dedicated fans of Squad a lot more than any faction update would do. I know the guys I play with, we see a new faction come out and it's like, okay, yeah, well, cool faction, let's hop in for a few games, and okay, yeah, it's a new faction, we figured it out, we got to play it for a little bit. But at the end of the day, everyone's just looking for performance upgrades. It is just at a state where it's not fun to play with the amount of problems and bugs and things that are wrong. And we would really just appreciate more time dedicated to that subject. And while I do think a lot of the questions that were answered in this Q&A were kind of non-answers and not helpful, I do think it was a very helpful Q&A, and I'm glad they're doing them again. I also think that Siege did a lot better job here at picking questions and at least trying to engage a little bit with the community. There was that whole debacle that happened a few months ago, if you didn't see it, in the Discord where they were leaking the PMC faction, and he was offering leaks to people who changed their Steam reviews to positive. Something against Steam's TOS, and two, just blatantly like, why would you do this? And so I think this Q&A improved my skepticism of how the community is being handled at least a little bit, and I'm glad to see that the Q&As are coming back, and I think it's a good thing for Squad in the long run. My main hope is that they just keep this community engagement up. Squad has a long history of community managers becoming the community manager. The first thing they do is get a lot more active with the community, and the community has a time of being very active and engaged, and then slowly over the course of time that goes down and down and down and down until eventually the community manager gets fired or leaves or something else, and they get a new one, and the cycle continues. And it has just happened year after year with community managers. They've had so many different community managers for Squad over the last few years, so I really hope this time it's different and that they can keep the engagement up, they can keep talking to the community, because I think overall that's going to be what is helpful for the game. Them doing these long periods of not communicating and then making a change suddenly, like the ICO out of the blue, just doesn't help people's reputation of OWI. And I think that this could be the first step to amending that relationship between a lot of people if they keep doing this. And like Siege said in the stream, keep doing these live streams either every other month or just keeping up with the community and engaging in this way. But that was just my thoughts on the situation of the Q&A. If you have different opinions of me, if you were expecting something else out of the Q&A, if you really enjoyed the Q&A, if you really hated it, just let me know in the comment section below. I tried something a little different with this video. I've been playing Squad for a very long time, and I'm very passionate about this subject and about this game, and so I'd love to be able to keep doing these types of videos, just talking about the state of the game, the community, the Q&As, all this stuff. But thanks for watching, and hopefully see you in the next one.